Thank you. Thank you, developers. How are you, developers? Greetings, developers. Well, my name is Developer, in honor of DDD Melbourne and the wonderful job you've done organizing this conference. Today, my name is Developer, and formerly known as Ivan Sun, software engineer Ivan Sun, multimedia artist Ivan Sun, formerly, who's exhibited in St. Kilda, Brunswick East, Bendigo, Chicago, San Diego, formerly known as Educator, who has been bringing software engineers, developers, software testers to the real world at RMIT, through RMIT, sorry, since year 2000. So I feel like I'm a bit of an elder, don't you think? I'm showing my age there. So welcome. I am Developer. My name is Developer for today, just in honor of the wonderful job that you guys have done. DDD organizers, you know where you are. Can we have a clap for them, please? So I came in late from a train from Bendigo. I missed 2 trains because I had a big night last night, exhibition launch. So I was at Liam's database. Is Liam here? Liam, database is amazing. I think database is amazing. You know, databases, my skill in database, handling databases have saved me through a couple of software disasters, so it might come in later. And then Susan with continuous improvement. Is Susan here? Susan, your enthusiasm was infectious. And then Andrew is here, conflict management. So part of navigating through, software disasters. For a developer, conflict management is important. So for all these reasons, when you have a drink with me afterwards at the Belgium Beer Garden, my name is Developer. And what is your name? Are your names Developer too? So today our topic is software disasters for fun, horror, enlightenment. I do want to, of course, thank our sponsors. Liberty, DevExpress, Octopus, Deploy, Insight, NetWealth, GitHub, SSW, Luminary, Codesk, Just Digital People, Quoria, The Sizzle. Sorry, need my glasses here. Collider. All right, that's the most I can do. But thank you, sponsors, because without you, we wouldn't have developers here. Are you ready for software disasters? So if I seem happy when I'm talking about software disasters, the guys in the middle here, right? It's not because I rejoice in deaths where software goes wrong, people die, as in Boeing 737 MAX. It's not that I rejoice in millions of dollars, taxpayer dollars, companies' dollars being lost through software disasters. But it's because software disasters allow us a special insight how the real world works and how we fit in as developers. And I was always concerned when I share this image because some of you might think that the image on the right would be enlightenment. How many of you thought that? So that's actually the fun, because I know that for most of you, education would turn you off, like the one on the left. At the thought of a lecture, I hate lectures. I don't see of myself as a lecturer, as an educator. I see of myself as somebody who plays with concepts and brings out of you information, intelligence, self-awareness, what is within in you. So when I look at the one on the right, I think of you guys having fun and looking forward to the fun, which I hope today's presentation will be. And when I look at the image on the left, I think of you guys as running away from education, from information and lectures. So how many of you know who is Martin Fowler? So he's one of the founders of the Agile movement, one of the co-authors of Agile Manifesto. He's a well-known author, software engineering architect. And so he wrote, "We are responsible for the code we write, both good and bad." So that underpins the reason why I'm giving this talk. Because since 2000, I've been teaching at RMIT and bringing software engineers, developers, and software testers into the real world through courses such as software engineering, fundamental software testing, and now computing security. I imagine what my students would react to being in the workplace and going through software project failures. Failures, what do we imagine by failures? What do we think of when we think of failures? Failure to meet, think of the project triangle. Failure to meet the budget, going over budget. Failure to deliver on time. And failure to meet the customer requirements. So I imagine my students in those shoes, in a project which is a project failure. And that was on the back of my mind when from week to week as I deliver a class, I would spend 10 minutes or so just running through the news and pulling out the different software disasters du jour, as in of the week, to share with them, just for a bit of fun and just to let them know that software disasters happen all the time. Software disasters could be part of the next project you're on, and how do we deal with them? So for all the software disasters that I shared with my students, I, of course, start to see patterns creeping in, or motifs. So if any of you are musicians, you think of motifs as repeating patterns. So I'm going to ask for your input with this. How many of you have been part of software disasters or project failures, which means failure to meet the budget, deadlines, or customer requirements? How many of you have been part of projects which may have been part of a disaster which relates to configuration calamity? Yes. So some examples that I've shared. So this talk is a little bit of a snapshot of different software disasters that I've shared, the best of software disasters I've shared with my students since 2016. So from 2000, I was teaching at RMIT and for some time full-time. But after going into industry, I came back in 2016 to work sessionally. So one example of configuration calamity is Amadeus. I'm not sure most of you would have heard of Amadeus. It's a software used for airlines to do load balancing. When you go into a plane, they have cargo at the bottom, they got passengers at the top. God knows if they know what our weight is, but apparently they use Amadeus to balance off the plane so that the plane, when the plane takes off, it's not overly balanced on one side or the other. So 2 or 3 years ago, there was a huge problem with configuration issues after a software upgrade, which impacted on British Airways and other major airlines, particularly in the London airport, Heathrow. Planes were delayed and flights were canceled because they weren't able to use the Amadeus load balancing software to work out where the plane is best positioned and balanced before they took off. Okay, next is a huge one, migration mishap. How many of you may have been involved with projects where a migration of a legacy system or combining different legacy systems into a new system, a cloud-based system perhaps, is the cause of a software disaster? Hands up. Yes, that is one of my favorite ones, having been involved with several and rescued several. Something that I want to share today, and one of the bases of what I want to share today is that sometimes to have rescued a software disaster and rescued a project from being on time, to deliver a project on time from a previous disaster, to deliver a project on budget, can win you more grief than if you had just been a little bit late, just been a little bit over budget, and just a little bit under what the customer expected. Because if you do everything on time, on budget, meeting the customer expectations, you will earn the anger of everyone else in the organization. But anyway, for migration mishaps, there were lots of examples for my wonderful students over the years. Examples were ATO, failure to meet, to bring legacy systems into more contemporary platforms. There are always winners and losers. Winners you might consider maybe the operating systems, because for supporting, for instance, I don't want to mention names, for instance, operating systems, they would charge extra millions of dollars each year for an organization such as the ATO for continuing on a operating system which is no longer supported for the everyday person. Defense, of course, was trying to migrate hundreds to 300s of legacy systems into one platform. And it went over budget, it went over time, hundreds of millions of dollars. One quip that I have for my students is that, well, hundreds of millions were not quite wasted because somebody pocketed it, right? As taxpayers, we hope that whoever pocketed it went, it went to a good cause, that somehow maybe they contributed back to society or developer industry, perhaps. Okay, let's move on. This is just a snapshot. There are more disaster motives than this, of course, but let's look at unlucky updates. How many of you have been part of software disasters that came out of an update or a patch, a routine patch even? All right, some hands there. Yes, for a lot of banks, telcos, a lot of the outages which they have, they would be reported on the news as resulting from a routine software update. The flip side of this is that if you didn't have software updates, if you didn't have patches, would that lessen the probability of a software disaster? What do you think? Any thoughts? So from my experience, when I did migrate over a legacy system, to just keep it in place operational when a new system is brought in, a more contemporary system, there were no reported bugs and failures for the 2 years that it took for the new system to come in to replace the legacy system. Because if there are no updates, no functional upgrades, no bug fixes to a system for 2 years, the chances are you may not even have any outages that comes from functional issues. Sorry if that is news to you. Okay, reuse regret. This is a bigger topic, so textbook-wise, Ariane 5, how many of you of Ariane 5? So that was in the 70s or 80s, I think. American rocket launch, delivering a satellite to space. So Ariane 5 was a more effective, a stronger, a more powerful model than Ariane 4. So they thought a lot of the software could be reused. So sorry, this is textbook, sorry if this is really what you know. But we haven't learned any lesson from that, because as part of Ariane 5, 3, 5, 6 seconds after launch, the rocket was in a different trajectory to what the previous model was. So different stabilization actions kicked in, which resulted in the rocket veering off the trajectory and exploding. So since then, we've had Boeing 737 MAX, where they had a more powerful engine, more fuel efficient, but for the budget airlines, 2 planes crashed and hundreds of people died. Sorry, that's the horror part of my presentation. And one of the root cause was that these airlines couldn't afford or didn't pay for the extra simulator or training components for the pilots, which helped them to adjust for the new a new software component which helped to adjust the nose direction of the plane when it's taking off for landing. So it's sad to hear that the lessons from the textbook example, RM5, hasn't been heeded. I do want to just move slightly to a software disaster of the day. How many of you did hear of McDonald's going down? Yes. So that went down in the UK, Australia, America, Tokyo, Japan, and other countries. And I just want to note here that it is amazing the information that you find just in the news. So we are techies, right? We are developers. But they often put in little snippets, little nuggets of information in articles. Configuration change. So that was the first motif that I shared with you. So the modus operandi of how I share software disasters with my students is no different from an incident management. So how many of you may be involved with triaging incident management? So would you tell me if this is quite different from what it is? What was the incident, before identifying if there was a software failure or hardware failure or otherwise? What's the impact to users and stakeholders? What was the root cause? And you'll be surprised at what is put in the news. And I don't for one moment think that what is shared in the news is real, is the final answer, but just that what is shared is an amazing learning point that I have, and a fun thing to share with the students for them to learn. What is the fix? What are the future actions? At this stage, I do want to talk about Horizon's post office, just because it's been in the news. How many of you may have seen the British TV series, Mr. Bates and the Post Office? So that was something that I shared with my students. It was a Fujitsu Horizon point of sale system, which means for instance, our Aussie Post branches here, the point of sale accounting, what money was taken in, any refunds, and at the end of the day, a balance generated. As part of my background, I did get involved in a startup with my partner, and we had a bricks and mortar financial planning business, and so we grew from startup to having 2,000 customers and $500 million under management. So I've left that now. But so that's some background of my interest in this. I'm astonished at a point of sale system which just tallies up the cash taken for the day and any refunds and any reversals for the day. That caused so much grief for the British Postal Office. A Fujitsu system, and I'm aware that we have a Fujitsu branch of their company here in Melbourne. They're developers. In fact, I sing at the choir with one of them. So part of the sensitivity of what I share, and I hope you appreciate too, is that software disasters impact on people's companies, vocations, but I hope you understand an honest discussion that we hope to have in order to learn from it or to move forward from it. So as a result of total tallies at the end of the day for these branches, and these were self-employed small business owner branches who, what's the term for it? Franchise, who are not direct employees of the British Postal Office. But between 2009, when the system was rolled out, to 2015, over 900 of them were prosecuted for theft and false accounting just because the tallies at the end of the day didn't match what they were supposed to have. So you all know the Little Britain skit, which says, computer says no, right? So when software disasters happen, you guys are the techies. You guys are the developers. So if someone at the front end says, computer says no, and you say you're a developer for an organization, people are really looking at you. What do you know? What were you doing? How did you let it happen? So as a result of those shortfalls, which could be thousands of pounds at the end of each week, cumulative, people took their lives, at least 6 people took their lives, from what I understand. 900 people, sub-postmasters, were arrested and convicted of theft, and of them, about 95 of them have deceased since when it was first reported. So sorry, this is the horror part of the presentation. So may I share with you something that I found on the internet with Computer Weekly. So we have different information and insider's view. I'm so interested to know what your point of view is as developers to developer. What do you think of this? So there was kind of an insider view or a whistleblower who said that he was involved with the development of this system, Horizon system, before it was deployed. So he said it never should have seen the light of day. It was not fit for purpose. So any software testers here? So one of the software testing principles, right? You might do all the right things, but the software is not fit for purpose. So everyone in the building, all the developers there knew it was a back of SHIT before it had been released. It had gone through the test labs, God knows how many times, and testers were raising bugs by the thousand. It's a good thing, isn't it, that testers were raising bugs? If you had raised the bug correctly, you could fix it as a developer. So why did this still continue to be a disaster? So that really piqued my interest. Is it not enough that we raise the bugs correctly? Can't we, as developers, fix the bugs in time to make it a good product? Food for thought. So the insiders said that the original system was built with no design documents. How many of you use design documents? Sequence diagrams, class diagrams? It's what we teach at RMIT, Software Engineering Fundamentals, what I've been teaching to my students for 20 years. So there were no code reviews. How many of you do not take part in code reviews, peer inspections? So this insider was saying these are textbook processes, procedures that he thought should be in place. I'm not for one moment saying that you have to do all those things for the software disaster to be averted, but it is just interesting that an insider who was involved in it said that. No code reviews, no coding standards. How many of you have been annoyed when you are picking up somebody else's code from your team and you realize that you didn't understand what it is and that they should have done things differently, commented differently? Apart from that, now this is sensitive because, I have at sometimes worked full-time as a full-time academic and sometimes sessionally as I am now, and I'm transitioning out of that to do my own edtech creative type projects. So this insider or whistleblower said that none of the people who were involved with delivering this Horizon software that resulted in the conviction, apparently wrongful conviction of 900 sub-masters in the UK, and over 6 deaths out of suicide because of the emotional, the stress and the impact of being accused of taking money from the British Post Office. He said that these developers did not have a computer science degree, did not have degree-level qualifications in the right field, as in computer science. They might have some lower-level qualifications, certs, but no experience in big development projects. They didn't know how to do any of this stuff, they just didn't know how to do it. Experience matters. I would qualify by this saying this, that where we are now today, I don't think a university degree is the one thing you need to be successful as a developer. I would say that your own aptitude, your own determination, your own ability, there is so much resources there. Where I do teach for a university, I try to make it worth its weight, worth what the students have paid for it, to give them something extra, something from my experience in industry, from my experience in life, to help them benefit from it. But there's more, So up to the day it was launched, the code still needed rewriting. There was a data dictionary which was still being updated. So the different transactions from the postal office was sent through asynchronously, and there was no fixed format for them to be encoded. So that resulted in data being written over, and therefore one of the reasons why for some of these sub-postmasters it didn't tally in the end. Something I'll share with you, a theory of mine, is that I think that some of them had monies that were under what they should have. Theoretically, you won't see this in the news, but part of what I want to do to honor the DDD organizers is to give you guys something new. I think that there will be sub-postmasters whose account may have been over as well, don't you think? Does it not make sense that some of them may have been over and some of them under? So all the scrutiny is on those whose accounts, daily accounts, weekly accounts, were thousands of pounds under by the end of the week, which put them in huge stress and pressure from the post office to put in their own money, the sub-postmasters to put in their own money to balance the account. So it stands to reason that there were some sub-postmasters whose accounts exceeded what they thought. It's a big question what they did with it. In some sense, perhaps the post office position was forced in that if they accepted there was a software issue, they may not have any way of tracking down whose accounts exceeded and that money disappeared. Sorry, just being controversial there. Finally, we'll just wrap this up and go on to the rest of the slides. This insiders say it was a prototype that was bloated and hacked together for several years and then pushed out screaming and kicking. It's so dramatic. As developers, the muggles think of us as really, glued to the desk, really placid developers. They don't know how much passion comes in our coding. But this baby was pushed out screaming and kicking out of the door. It should never have seen the light of the day, never. What would you have done? So that's what I imagine my students in that position. What can I tell my students to be prepared for being in a team like Fujitsu when they knew that their baby was being pushed up, screaming and kicking out of the door? I did worry about being, one of the last persons between you and the Belgian beer garden, but perhaps if I do my job right, a lot of you may be more thirsty for a drink or lemonade, right? Because of the horror of software disasters. One suggestion I wanted to make to the organizers, just as a playful suggestions, perhaps DDD might stand for Dungeons and Dragons and Developers. How many of you are fans of Dungeons and Dragons? All right. I never understood the rules. All my good friends in high school were playing D&D. But no one told me. Just like the AFL, no one told me what the rules were, so how am I supposed to play or enjoy it? So, the dragon is like your employer. You are the developer, you are the wizard, right? Don't you know that the muggles, sorry to mix metaphors and symbols here, don't you know that the muggles think that what you guys do is magic? They enjoy their tech, they enjoy their apps. What you guys do is magic. What we do is magic to them. But we have the insider view. We stand between the dungeon and the dragons. What is the dragon? The dragon is the establishment, the employer, the big corporations, the government, whatever is the establishment is, which is the ruling class. We are the keepers of the information, and if we become aware that what the establishment gives out is different from what we see on the inside, that puts us in a very unique and difficult position. What do we do? The dungeon, of course, is symbolic of, it could be a physical prison. You think of Julian Assange, you think of Chelsea Manning. What they did, they thought was in the interest of humanity. What they saw was unlawful, illegal activity in terms of international laws or otherwise. So I'm just trying to put forward the idea that as techies, as developers, we are in a position where we're between the dungeons and the dragons, a difficult position. I'm so interested to know what your thoughts were. are about this, but we have time. I don't know if a Q&A today, but we have time at the Belgian Beer Garden. 5:16, I'm going out of time. So running past this, I'll try and wrap up. As part of my gift to D&D Melbourne, I want to give you things which has never been shared in the world, which are totally created just for you guys. So, as warlocks, as developers, you're put in the position between the Dungeons and Dragons. And the dungeons might be metaphorical, right? You might be put in a difficult position of being imprisoned, trapped in your ethical dilemma, if your employer, if the tech that you're working for is in conflict with your ethical requirements. What do you do? So conventionally, you think you whistleblow. That was part of my biggest fear. So when one of my students in 2016, when I was sharing the Volkswagen software disaster. How many of you are aware of the Volkswagen software disaster, where they were supposedly meeting green standards, but in test situations, but in real-world operational situations, the cars were kind of not meeting the green standards. So one of my students asked me, were software engineers not aware of this? Were the developers not aware of this? Did they not say anything? Did anyone not whistleblow? And I thought to myself, oh my God. Whistleblowing is not a topic that I wanted to share or discuss with my students because it's fraught with so many dangers. But you guys are all experienced developers. I'm comfortable sharing that with you. Pluses and minuses, ethical imperative, yes. I know that what the organization is doing is right. I want to whistleblow. There are legal provisions protecting the whistleblowers. What's the ramification? The employer might ostracize you, and the establishment might have, to paraphrase a US senator, might 6 ways from Sunday to strike at you if you go against the establishment. So we are put in this ethical dilemma. Sorry to be honest. So especially for you guys, I invented 2 alternatives, the whistle fart. How many of you have heard of the whistle fart? No, you haven't because it's new. I invented it for you guys. So, whistle fart, it's like Project Veritas. You get put in a sting. Somebody, dates you in Bumble or Grindr, and you spill your guts over a couple of glasses of wines about what you really think of the software, what you really thought of Horizons, what you really thought of your employer, and how there's a mismatch between what you see inside from what the organization is saying to the outside. So that's a whistle fart. But there are benefits to it, The pluses are you are publicly humiliated, right? The negatives are it might have impact on your job, but at least your employer knows that it was unintended. You are not a whistleblower. You just got drunk, and you are trying to impress a date, and you just let on more that you should know. So the employer might actually support you with that. So the third alternative is a whistle suck, and I invite you to have a think about that over a beer or a drink or a lemonade at the Belgian Beer Garden. What is a whistle suck? Is it sucking it in? Is it not saying anything about your ethical dilemma? Or is it something else? So finally, I want to say, sorry, I'm a bit over time. I'm not selling anything, developers. I'm not selling anything to you as a developer. I'm not looking for a job. I'm kind of semi-retired. I'm doing creative, educational projects that I love. I'm doing projects of passion at the moment. I want to invite you to think of a revolution. So I'm selling something even bigger than a platform, a service, a consultancy opportunity. Shall we not have a revolution, developers? If you are familiar with the Agile Manifesto, of which Martin Fowler was one of the co-authors, so it's not that I hate big tech. It's not that I hate big tech dominating as a monolith over everything we do, having our information. But I think it might be better for humanity that we have more diversity of software and small developers, small operations, open source, right? So it's not that I hate big corporations. I've happily been employed with different big tech organizations and have been proudly saying that my students have gone on to IBM or Telstra or other tech organizations, but perhaps the individual developer's well-being and ethical dilemmas to be healthily resolved, that is perhaps something which we should prioritize as developers over corporate well-being and profit. This is version 0.1, right? True to form, being a developer, this is version 0.1. Up for revisions over beer, over lemonade at the Belgian Beer Garden. Human rights over, as developers, if it comes across an issue with our stakeholders or end users, it's not that we should play down what we need to do when there's a crisis, but not forget our existing human rights, which has come out of World War II and all the disasters and the abuse of human rights that occurred there. And finally, it's not that I want you guys to not be loyal to employers who give you a salary and the things that you enjoy in life, but to have a think about whether it's not more important to have the solidarity that you have amongst yourselves now, DDD, right, over loyalty to the employer. So if you read the Agile Manifesto, that's kind of the pattern that it comes with. So I'm over time, I know, but thank you for listening to me, and call me developer. You can come and chat with me at the Belgian Beer Garden, and shall we not have a revolution? Show me please with a clap if you support this idea.